How long have you been gardening here?
Well, my wife and I moved here in 1975, and for the first 5 years we lived in a small house right kind of in behind me on the hill up there. And that house had no foundation in it, so for the first 3 or 4 years I spent underneath the house trying to jack it up. And at that time I failed miserably and we built this house here. And that's when the garden started.
So how does it feel to be in a garden that has so much rich history? And can you tell us a little bit about that history?
Well, this garden originally came about by the woman that lived right behind us, and her name was Pauline May, and she was a nurse in Seattle, and her sister, who lived in the little house that we had stayed in for 4 or 5 years, her sister was married to a landscaper. And he's the guy that kind of, I think, started this whole thing. He put in the ponds, he did a lot of planting around here. He used to have a little greenhouse right where our house is right now. And they lived here for about 40 years, something like that. And then when we came here, we had the summer house, we had the ponds, so we had just a really good start on stuff.
Yeah, so I see you've retained the ponds. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges that you may have encountered while setting up and establishing the garden and or continuing through working with so much water?
Well, working with water is kind of a challenge in itself, that's for sure. And repairing ponds that had been put in back in the 30s and 40s presented a problem because I couldn't really shut the water off because it runs year-round. But I get pretty creative in putting in conduit pipes and drainage systems and using sawhorses and pumps and then getting as much water out of them as I can and then do the repair of them.
So in addition to the pond work, can you talk to us about any potential like organic practices or composting or anything like that you've introduced?
Well, I mean, originally this was a bog, so it has a lot of sediment that is organic in it. And that kind of lends itself to the richness of the place. But the soil is moist and it retains water, so trying to put any kind of a plant in here, like a manzanita or something that is more drought tolerant, they really struggle. So I had to struggle with that, learning that you just can't put something in because it has good soil, but it has to like water.
Right, right. So what are your favorite things about your garden? Favorite plants? Favorite portions?
Sequoias are my favorite things, but other than that, there's so much here, and it kind of depends. My favorite thing was probably something that I just got at the new nursery last week.
Ah, all right. So what's that?
Well, I got a buckhorn, and it's really kind of a clever little plant. The buckhorns have been around for years and years, but this is kind of a fuzzy little, looks like a fern. So that's my favorite one so far.
That's great. What's your favorite tool?
Of course, the root slayer is my go-to piece of equipment for doing. I have a big bamboo patch down there that I have to wrestle with because it is a bamboo that is a spreader. And it likes to run from dry soil, so it takes off and runs like a shot.
So you've been working on this garden for years. Are you a planner? Have you planned along the way, or have you been winging it?
Pretty much winging it.
Yeah?
Pretty much winging it, yeah. I've had some help with a couple of people, but pretty much it has just evolved.
Yeah. What would you consider your biggest challenge?
Keeping the water going through here, I think is a big challenge, and finding the right mix of plants. You know, there's just a tremendous amount of stuff out in the market that you know, you can't go to any kind of nursery without finding something that's kind of unique and can kind of tweak it.
Yeah. So if you had to give advice to a novice gardener, what type of guidance or advice might you give the person?
I think that the biggest thing is just because you've killed a plant doesn't mean you can't make it work. You know, you gotta, if you've killed it maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe it's time to kind of give that a goodbye. But I've on 2, 3 times, 4 times on a plant, and finally figure out how to make that thing grow and survive.
That's great. So what's your favorite time of year here? Favorite time of day and favorite time of year in your garden?
Well, spraying in the morning and the evening is really my favorite time.
Yeah.
My biggest challenge here in this garden is working with water, and that runs 12 months out of the year, and there's always some surprises with it. And with water becomes, you also attract animals. You got to attract animals, so that is kind of another dimension. I've had mountain beaver here that like the water. I have muskrats here that like the water. I have had raccoons that like the water, and I have raised fish in here.
Wow.
And the fish like the water, but the raccoons like the fish.
What's the most difficult time you've had with a critter?
I think that the muskrat was one of the things that was really a challenge, because it was right when we were having our first garden tour here, and he made a house right here in this pond here, and my wife was into the growing dahlias, and he was into eating dahlias. That was an opportunity for disaster right there. Well, the sequoias, I first got a glimpse of one of those guys. The Bellevue Botanical Garden has some. And that was the first time I saw him, and I thought right away, I have to have one of those guys. And I went to do some research. I found a grower in Oregon that was growing them. I talked to the buyer up at Sky, and she said, how many do you want? And after a few phone calls, they got a hold of them, and they're a little bit, the information that was presented to me about them, they were going to grow in 10 years, they'd be between 10 and 12 feet tall. And I got them when they were about 6 feet tall. I brought them home here, all 3 of them, back into my pickup truck, and put them in the ground, and they hit 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet in probably less than 3-4 years. And they just took off, and they didn't stop.
Wow.
And they are originally from an area south of San Francisco, below San Jose, in the Mount Loma Prieta area. And that was when they had the big earthquake in 1989, and the guy that found these things named them after the earthquake.
Wow. So your garden is lovely, and it's full of items. Is there anything missing? Anything that you consider missing that you really want to add?
Probably I'll find something, I'm sure, at the next plant sale. But there are some plants that I have on a list that are really hard to get a hold of, but I'm still looking. The next project. Well, I'm working on this garden up here on the back side. That's my latest one, and after I get that one done and this little guy here established in 3 or 4 years, I'll be over 80, and so I'm probably going to take a rest. I have some species rhododendrons that one of them is called rhododendron nathalii, and it has the most beautiful, the largest flower of all rhododendrons, and it's fragrant. The only problem with it is that it is not frost hardy.
Oh no.
So it has to be in a pot, and it's getting bigger, and so it's a lug it. To lug it in every winter into the greenhouse or into this little house here, and keep it over the years. But I've had it for about 12 years.